Sign these or I'll commit you, my daughter whispered, the day my $890 million restaurant empire stopped feeling like mine. She slid the papers across the mahogany table with shaking hands. Sign these, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Or I'll have you committed. For a moment, I thought she was joking. Then I looked into my daughter's eyes, and realized she wasn't. I built my restaurant empire from a food truck. That's not poetic exaggeration. It was a rusted, second-hand truck parked near the docks of Chicago, where the wind smelled like salt and ambition. I was 32, broke, recently divorced, and raising a 4-year-old girl named Alina who believed I could fix anything. She used to sit on an overturned milk crate inside that truck, swinging her little legs while I flipped burgers and experimented with spices. I'd hand her fries, and she'd say, "Papa, when I grow up, I'll make this place famous." I believed her. Over the years, one truck became 3. 3 became storefronts. Storefronts became franchises. Eventually, our name, Marrow and Flame, was etched in glass towers and airport terminals. Analysts called it one of the fastest-growing hospitality brands in North America. Last year, a financial magazine estimated its valuation at $890 million. But none of that mattered as much as the little girl who once wiped ketchup on my apron and told customers, "My dad makes the best food in the world." Alina grew up inside the business. She studied hospitality management at Cornell University, top of her class. When she returned, she didn't ask for a position. She earned it, started in operations, managed locations, took over marketing. She was sharp, poised, and carried herself with a calm authority I never had. When investors asked about succession plans, I'd smile and say, "My daughter is the future." And I meant it. The first red flag was small. So small I almost laughed at myself for noticing. She began insisting I rest more. "You've done enough, Dad," she'd say. "Let me handle the board meetings." At first, it felt like love. Consideration. I was 68, my knees ached. I'd survived a mild stroke 2 years prior, nothing catastrophic, but enough to scare her. She started managing my calendar. Then she suggested consolidating my personal assets, for efficiency. "Estate planning is just responsible," she told me one evening over tea in my penthouse overlooking the lake. "What if something happens to you?" I remember staring at the water, watching the city lights ripple, thinking how proud I was that she thought ahead like that. I signed preliminary documents transferring minor shares into a family trust. Nothing dramatic, nothing alarming. At least, that's what I believed. The second red flag didn't feel small. It felt off. I arrived at headquarters one morning, and my executive assistant, who had worked with me for 20 years, wouldn't meet my eyes. "Mr. Rahman," she said carefully, "Alina asked that all communications be routed through her for now." "For now?" I asked. She said you needed less stress. Less stress. It was presented as protection, as care, but it felt like distance. That afternoon, Alina came into my office with her usual calm smile. "You missed your cardiology appointment last week," she said, sitting across from me. "Dr. Weiss mentioned some cognitive lapses." I frowned. "Cognitive lapses?" She hesitated, "Just long enough. Just minor memory inconsistencies. It's normal at your age." Normal. The word echoed. I've always been meticulous. I remember recipes from 30 years ago. Exact supplier pricing from 1998. The anniversary of every restaurant opening. Yet suddenly, people were speaking around me, not to me. Board minutes were summarized instead of shared. Financial reports were condensed. Decisions were already in motion. When I confronted Alina gently, she placed her hand over mine. "You taught me to be decisive," she said. "Trust me the way I've always trusted you." And I did, because she was my daughter. Because I remembered the milk crate in the food truck. Because love blinds you in ways logic never will. The night everything shifted was quiet. Too quiet. She invited me to dinner at her home, a modern estate on the outskirts of the city. Her husband, Daniel, greeted me warmly. He had joined our company's strategic team 3 years earlier. Smart, polished, always respectful, but that evening, he barely spoke. After dessert, Alina cleared the table herself. That was unusual. She had staff. She returned with a leather folder. "I need you to sign a few things," she said. "Now." I chuckled lightly. "Can't it wait until Monday?" "It's time sensitive." Her tone was different, firm, almost rehearsed. She opened the folder and laid out several documents. Transfer of majority voting rights. Medical power of attorney. A revised trust structure naming her as sole controlling trustee. My chest tightened. This is extensive, I said carefully. It protects the company, she replied. Investors are nervous about your health. My health, I repeated. Daniel finally spoke. The board needs stability. I looked from him to my daughter. I'm stable, she exhaled slowly, as if bracing herself. Dad, she said, softer now. There have been concerns. What concerns? She slid another paper forward. A psychiatric evaluation request. My vision blurred. What is this? If you don't sign the transfer, she said, her voice trembling but unwavering, we'll have to proceed with a competency review. I stared at her. You think I'm incompetent? Her eyes filled, but no tears fell. This isn't personal. Not personal. The words felt like ice. I leaned back in the chair, memories flooding in. The truck. The fries. Her tiny hands holding mine crossing the street. Alina, I whispered, why are you doing this? She swallowed. Sign these, she said, barely audible now. Or I'll have you committed. In that moment, the empire I built didn't matter. The skyscrapers, the investors, the headlines, none of it. All I saw was my daughter across the table, holding papers like weapons made of ink. And somewhere deep inside me, something began to shift. Not anger, not yet, something colder. Because as I reached for the pen, I noticed something else. A name on the bottom of the page. Not just hers, not just Daniel's, but a federal agency listed in the disclosure clause. And that was when I realized. This wasn't only about control. This was something far bigger. And I had no idea how long it had been unfolding behind my back. Sign these or I'll commit you, my daughter whispered. I didn't sign. My hand hovered over the paper, the pen trembling just enough for her to notice. But I didn't sign. Instead, I looked at the disclosure clause again. There it was, clear as daylight, a line referencing cooperation with the. My pulse slowed. Not panic, not confusion, clarity. Why is the FBI mentioned in my estate documents? I asked quietly. Alina's expression flickered, just for a second. A crack in the composure she'd perfected over years of boardrooms and investor dinners. It's standard language, Daniel answered too quickly. No, I said calmly. It isn't. Silence spread across the dining room like spilled ink. I had built an $890 million company from scratch. I knew contracts. I knew risk mitigation. I knew when something was being buried in technical language. And this wasn't standard. I set the pen down. I won't sign anything tonight. Alina inhaled sharply. Dad, I won't. For the first time in my life, I saw something in her eyes that terrified me more than anger. Desperation. That night, I didn't go home. I told them I needed air. Instead, I drove to the one place that had never betrayed me, the original storefront, still standing in a quieter neighborhood of. It was closed, but I kept a key. Inside, the scent of wood smoke and spices lingered in the walls. I stood in the dark dining room, running my fingers along the back of a chair I'd personally chosen 15 years ago. Something was wrong. Not with my memory, not with my health, with the story I was being told. I called the only person I still trusted without question, Samuel Green, our former CFO. I had retired him 3 years earlier after 30 loyal years. He had protested at the time, said he wasn't ready to step down, but Alina insisted the company needed modern financial restructuring. I remember how hurt he looked. He answered on the third ring. Mr. Rahman, I need to ask you something, I said. Off the record. There was a pause. I was wondering when you'd call. We met the next morning at a quiet cafe near the river. Samuel didn't look surprised to see me unsettled. They've been preparing this for months, he said carefully. Preparing what? A leadership transition. Quietly. I stared at him. They told the board your health was deteriorating faster than expected. That's not true. I know. My chest tightened. Why didn't anyone tell me? He hesitated. Because the narrative was convincing. Convincing. Medical reports had been circulated. Notes about confusion during meetings. Missed calls. Memory inconsistencies. Small things. Things that, taken individually, meant nothing. But together, they painted a picture. In the FBI? I asked. Samuel leaned in. There's been an inquiry. My breath caught. Into what? Financial irregularities. Minor ones, but enough to trigger review. They were traced to executive decisions made under your authorization. That's impossible, I whispered. That's what I thought. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were copies of internal memos, approval chains, digital signatures. My signature. Except, the timestamps didn't align with my records. I never approved these expansions, I said slowly. They were approved under your credentials. A chill crawled up my spine. Identity misuse. Not theft in the obvious sense. Manipulation. If I were declared mentally unfit, any questionable decisions would fall on declining judgment. The company would survive. The board would stabilize under Alina's leadership. And any investigation, closed quietly. It protects the brand, Samuel said gently. At a cost. I sat back, the cafe noise fading around us. My daughter. The little girl who once told customers I made the best food in the world. Had she believed this was necessary? Or had someone convinced her it was? Is she in danger? I asked suddenly. Samuel frowned. Danger. From investors. From Daniel. From anyone pushing this. He chose his words carefully. Daniel's consulting firm stands to gain significantly from the restructuring. Of course. Strategic oversight contracts. Performance-based equity. Control. That afternoon, 2 men in dark suits arrived at my penthouse. They introduced themselves calmly. Agents from the, not aggressive, not accusatory, professional. We'd like to clarify a few financial authorizations, one of them said. I invited them in. For 2 hours, we reviewed documents. I showed them personal logs, handwritten notes, appointment records. My meticulous habit of recording daily decisions suddenly became my lifeline. The agents exchanged glances more than once. These approvals don't match your documented schedule, one finally said. They don't, I replied steadily. Because I didn't make them. They didn't promise anything, but their tone shifted, from suspicion to curiosity. Before leaving, one of them asked a quiet question. Has anyone recently attempted to obtain medical power of attorney over you? I held his gaze. Yes. That evening, Alina came to see me. No folder, no documents, just her. You spoke to someone, she said softly. I did. Her composure was cracking now. You're making this harder than it has to be. Harder for who? I asked. She looked exhausted. For everyone. I studied her face, the faint dark circles, the tension in her jaw. Did you believe I was losing my mind? I asked. Her lips parted, then closed. I believed. The company needed protection. From me. From uncertainty. There it was. Not hatred. Not greed. Fear. Fear of instability. Fear of investors pulling out. Fear of losing what we built. But fear can justify terrible decisions. Why involve federal authorities? I asked quietly. She hesitated. There were irregularities. The board insisted on transparency. And instead of asking me, you tried to remove me. Tears finally welled in her eyes. I thought you'd resist. I did resist, I said gently. Silence stretched between us. For a moment, I saw the 4-year-old girl again. Then it vanished, because behind her, standing near the doorway, was Daniel. Watching, calculating, and in that instant, I understood something terrifying. This wasn't finished. The investigation wasn't closed. The board wasn't unified, and whatever narrative had been built around my decline was already in motion. The agents had my logs. Samuel had the financial discrepancies. Alina had made her move. Now the truth would surface. But truth, in corporations this size, doesn't arrive gently. It detonates reputations, families, legacies. As Daniel stepped forward and said, we need to discuss next steps. I realized the battle ahead wasn't just for control of a company. It was for my name. And for my daughter's soul.